Everything you need to know about dollarization and de-dollarization. Today we discuss.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
One of the topics du jour in worldwide economics is the dollarization and de-dollarization. And we are going to answer some of those questions. First, using as reference a very interesting paper, research done by an Argentinian economist, Eduardo Yeyati, and he wrote a very interesting paper regarding the dollarization in Latin American economies. We also are going to address this particular trend, this particular buzzword about the dollarization in the rest of the world, the US as the de facto world reserve currency, and also which are the possibilities of de-dollarization worldwide. So let's start. First, let's address dollarization in Latin America and why it happens and why it is so difficult to see de-dollarization on Latin American economies, and you can use it as a proxy to other emerging markets all over the world. This information is from 2021. It's a very interesting take about the subject. In these particular cases of dollarization in Latin America, we saw it on Ecuador, Panama, El Salvador, and on a lesser degree in places like my home Venezuela that is living a de facto dollarization of the economy, and similar cases within Latin America. There are four major causes regarding why an economy gets dollarized. The first is volatility, especially, of course, regarding the volatility of the local currency. The other thing is liquidity, that many times, depending on a particular black swan event, let's call it like that, happens a lot cases of illiquidity on the markets, on these particular Latin American markets, and when everything, goes out, and especially the liquidity regarding the hard currency, and especially the US dollar. The third thing is the macro situation. Of course, when a particular currency, a weak currency in Latin America, loses confidence for the perception of the rest of the world, is very more difficult in order to eliminate the frictions regarding transactions and doing international trade worldwide. And the fourth thing is, of course, politics. Politics in Latin America is, an issue by itself. But when you have lack of trust on each particular government and being pegged, the local economy, being pegged to a trustworthy, quote unquote, a trustworthy currency like the USD, increases the confidence on international players. One of the reasons that happens a lot regarding dollarization and de-dollarization is actually more politics rather than economics. Of course, when you have, let's say, less trustworthy political players on each particular economy, of course, hence you have more instability, more risk, and hence international players are less likely to participate on international trade with a particular regional market. So dollarization is one way in order to increase the confidence of international players regarding a particular regional Latin American economy. Other reason for dollarization is debt. All the time, most countries run trade deficits and also have a particular debt to GDP ratio that is usually high. So when you have debt usually when you have debt, you have it on hard currency, most cases on the US dollar. So this particular debt assets and this particular debt overall has to be served on hard currency, most likely the US dollar. So in many cases in Latin America, when a currency gets depreciated, and there are a couple of benefits of depreciating the currency, mostly for imports, for import purposes, and import and export actually, mostly the exports become more valuable for the worldwide markets when a typical currency gets depreciated, and hence becomes cheaper, the export for such economies and hence more attractive. However, that creates a particular issue regarding cash flow because the cash flow, the revenue that you get for such exports becomes less valuable and hence less likely in order to serve the purposes that are on USD, both for governments and also for private companies. And lastly, we have to talk regarding the case for dollarization is commerce, worldwide commerce, international commerce integration. When significant players around a particular market, in this particular case, a Latin American market, when you have a dollarization process, you have more harmony in order to engage in such process of imports, exports, supplies, and that kind of thing. So you eliminate substantial risk, but also you eliminate frictions in order to conduct business as usual. For instance, when you are exporting to another country, instead of doing the exchange rate, so you eliminate that particular step in order to engage in trade with a particular market. At the end, when you buy and sell on USDs, most of the counterparts internationally, they also have to engage on USD financial transactions, and that eliminates substantially some frictions regarding international commerce. Now, the question is, how difficult is to de-dollarize an economy that is already dollarized, and how does affect global markets? Well, the issue with de-dollarization is that first, you need to address the political and especially the monetary policy that created the dollarization process on the first place. Usually, dollarization occurs after a collapse on the global market and on this particular regional market, actually. And afterwards, there is a process that is a little bit uncomfortable of changing from the local weak currency in order to go to the hard currency, in this particular case, the USD. So usually that happened for a reason, usually terrible monetary policies, and not so much trustworthy governments and politicians implementing economic and monetary policies on that particular territory, in this particular case, in Latin America. So in order to go back from dollarization to that particular, monetary standard of using a local currency, first you need to address all of the bad policies, especially monetary policies and fiscal policies that created that particular scenario on the first place. And when the local players, the local authorities, don't have sufficient trust, first for their own population, but also from international players, that process of de-dollarization becomes harder and harder and harder, unsustainable, and in most cases is impossible to sustain. The issue comes regarding the incentives from the local politicians, the local players, because the issue is that when you have your own currency, regardless if it's weak or not, you have control because you control the fiscal policies and also the monetary policies. When you dollarize a particular economy, you lose the power that you have on monetary policy, relying only on fiscal policies, fiscal strategies. And this is a power, of course, that the local authorities want, but when they lose confidence for the rest of the players involved on such economies, recovering that trust is next to impossible, and that's why de-dollarizing a particular economy is next to impossible as well. Now, let's address this particular dilemma worldwide and this topic du jour regarding the US dollar losing the status of world's reserves currency. Is going to happen? Well, maybe, but it's not going to be as most people think. We already addressed that when you have a dollarization process on a particular economy is because the authorities that implement monetary policy, the confidence on such authorities has been lost, and regaining that trust is next to impossible. On this particular case, the authorities of monetary policy come from, of course, the United States, that especially the Federal Reserve, that they issue the policies and implement the policies of the US dollar, not only in the United States, spot for worldwide standards. Now, we have seen on the past, let's say, half a decade, that the monetary policy from the United States has been lackluster at best, and the currency has been debased on the past 5 years, let's say, since COVID, and slowly other big players worldwide are starting to lose a little bit, but not on a draconian matter, the confidence on US dollar. However, the US dollar counterparts have not been performing as well in order to capitalize, in order to create more confidence compared to the US dollar. You have to talk about the euro. Of course, you have to talk about the ECB, the European Central Bank, that has the performance of the ECB has been lackluster, to say the least. And also other big economies like China, and of course you have the renminbi, the Chinese currency, that doesn't exactly create the most confidence worldwide in order to be used as a de facto worldwide currency. Now, if the US dollar gets replaced by, of course, and loses the status of world's reserves currency, it's not going to be against another currency, like many people say, the Chinese renminbi. Most likely will be the case that instead of two sovereign nations doing trade amongst each other and using a third currency, like this happens a lot, that they use the USD as a reference for their particular exchange rate, what might happen is, instead of using another currency like the renminbi, just for the sake of the conversation, most likely they will use their own currencies, swaps amongst each other, and just eliminating this particular middleman, if you want, this financial middleman, that in this particular case is the US dollar, and in many transactions worldwide and still today is used the US dollar. So instead, they are going to use just swaps and straight up exchanging their own currencies. And these particular transactions worldwide, actually you have seen an increase of bilateral transactions on currency regarding the using a middleman, in this particular case, the US dollar. And the last thing is that in order to de facto de-dollarize the rest of the economy and leaving the United States just important within their own economy, that's still the biggest economy in the world, 25% of worldwide GDP. So still, it won't be a complete tragedy. However, in order to make that happen, you have to take into account the sovereign debt of each of the rest of the nations, that usually these particular nations have substantial debt that was issued on USD. So in order to serve that particular debt, they need US dollars. So if the US dollar loses this particular, financial power compared to the rest of the world, first, we need to see a sovereign debt crisis that will create mayhem for the worldwide economy before that we see this particular process of complete de-dollarization for the rest of the countries.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again, and have a nice day.